Hi and welcome to my photography channel. My name is Martin Andreasson and I'm a photographer based in Sweden, Stockholm. I wanted to make this video as an introduction to my channel first of all, but also to sort of explain my passion for film photography and photography in general in this first introductory video. Since I started shooting film again, a lot has happened in the film photography community. And I followed it quite closely now for the last couple of years since I started shooting film again. And especially during the pandemic, you could see new podcasts popping up, new YouTube channels, but you can also see it in the used camera and lens prices in the used market, where a couple of years ago you could buy a camera quite cheap. Now they cost as much as a digital camera, which is quite insane. But it tells us how much the community has grown and how many more people are into film photography, which is a very good thing. I think it's very important to support the film photography community, and in doing so, in different ways, we can keep shooting film for many years ahead, and not only by buying film, but also about spreading the word about film photography and our passion for it, so that other people might enjoy and start shooting film as well. So just a little backstory and background as to why I started shooting film and why I love it so much, and why I choose later on to start shooting film again. I always carried cameras around from an early age, as long as I can remember. I was getting toy cameras, the small plastic rectangular ones with a spinning flash on top, and I switched those for better cameras, pocket cameras like Olympus cameras and so on, at an early age too. And on our journeys and travels across Sweden and sometimes abroad, I love bringing those cameras and documenting my life and the journey. And then the other part was also always to create a little album together with my brother here back in Sweden. And underneath each frame or picture, we would write a little block of text explaining what was in the image and our feelings when we took the image, and usually with some humor. And it was very, very fun to take those albums together and go through them together and have a laugh and share the memories with those. Back then, I think the most important thing was to document things around you and sharing the memories together and create the albums, and not so much about the gear actually. Sure, the camera was important, but you didn't really know too much in how to create good images or how to work the cameras differently to make better images. You just press that button and try to document everything around you. So that passion for photography carried on over the years, and I kept shooting film and buying new cameras and creating new albums and images and memories. So the first real film camera I got hold of was actually from my grandfather. I remember it was a Mamaya camera, and I loved that camera so much. That actually set me on a new path to look for a photo school here in Sweden that started a new journey into film photography for me. Those years attending that school was probably among the most important years in my life when it comes to what my passion was and what I felt I was meant to be somehow. I learned so much about photography and met so many cool people and like-minded people when it comes to what you like and your passion is. And I felt I was meant to be there and meant to be part of photography somehow for the rest of my life. Also, over the years at that school, you were exposed to a lot of kind of different films and cameras and equipment that will help you decide what you wanted to shoot with and to work with. And I think that's also where I found my passion for black and white photography, and why that is always going to be the core of my photography. I think I will always come back to black and white and monochrome photography. I think the film stock that always will be closest to my heart when it comes to film photography, and especially black and white photography, is Kodak Tri-X. And I was very inspired by a Swedish photographer named Anders Pedersen. And he always shot his images very, very grainy and black and white contrast images. And I took a lot of inspiration from that and sort of implemented that look into my work as well. Even if my photography developed over the years and I started to shoot a lot of different things like portraiture and events and weddings and so on, I think my base as a photojournalist was always visible in those images as well. And my thinking was always my plan was always to create some type of story or emotion in the images. And for me, that's always been very, very important. Along the way there, besides developing your skills and working with photographers and so on, you also sort of narrow down what kind of cameras you like to shoot with. And you had friends shooting different cameras as well that sort of inspired you or made an impression. And right after those years in school there, I got my first real professional camera. That was a Canon EOS 1. And I remember getting so inspired by that camera in the beginning, and just feeling it in my hands and the weight of it, and it felt like a tank. And I shot my first real event of that one, a big Thai boxing gala here in Sweden called K1, and it was nerve-wracking, of course, but I just felt so confident with that camera. And at that time, that camera was actually quite old, and the other photographers there had much newer Nikon cameras, like I think the F5 and so on. And I remember my camera making so much noise. So people were basically looking at me and wondering, what the hell is this guy doing with that old antique camera? But I don't know, I was in my element there and shooting, and I was actually quite happy with some of the images from that camera from that evening. That very same evening I had a good friend with me that actually shot the same gala, but from his view. And he brought the Nikon F5 that he loaned from work. He worked for a newspaper in Stockholm at the time. And I got to see the speed and accuracy of that camera firsthand when he was shooting it, and looking through the pictures we developed afterwards, I could see he had nailed focus a lot more than I had with my Canon EOS 1. So I was very, very impressed with that camera, and I got to hold it a bit as well and try it out afterwards. And I sort of decided then and there that I would get a professional Nikon body down the line at some point. In the end, the Nikon F5 wasn't the camera body I decided to get eventually, because I worked with another photographer as an assistant, and he was using the little brother, the Nikon F100, Nikon F5's little brother. So that was a smaller camera body, but basically with the same features as the Nikon F5, and that was the camera I decided to get in the end. I was very impressed by it, and the smaller camera body also suited my needs a lot better than the heavy F5. After getting the F100, that quickly became my main camera body, and actually one of my favorite film cameras ever up to date. and became my last camera, my last film camera, before transitioning into digital photography a few years later. And I was going to miss the camera dearly from time to time. But before selling it in the end, I got to bring that camera pretty much everywhere with me, on trips to Thailand and shooting my kids and family in my day-to-day life, and it never let me down. It was such a well-built camera body, packed with all those features, and being that light as it is, it made for the perfect travel camera and a documentary tool, in my opinion. One of the best cameras ever. So my transition into digital photography was basically done around the year 2005, after I sold my Nikon F100, my beloved Nikon F100. And what made the transition a little bit easier was that I found the Nikon D700, that for me was the closest thing to film photography in my mind. And what was also very nice was that you could still use the same lenses that I used on my Nikon F100. So it sort of made the transition very, very smooth for me, and it felt like I was still shooting film in some ways. Those next few years I was caught in that rat race that we all get caught up in, shooting digital photography, looking for the next big thing and upgrading to the next camera model and so on. And I was very guilty of that too, and the camera I upgraded to after the Nikon D700 was the Nikon DF, which was a very, very nice camera, and I still have that camera up to this point. And I paired the Nikon DF together with the Nikon D4. Sharing the same sensors, those two cameras I still have up to this point, and they pretty much do everything I want to with my digital photography. I went through the Nikon D810 to get all those pixels and being able to crop and so on, but I realized that wasn't for me, and I was very happy with the Nikon DF and D4 for many years, and still am actually. Like everyone else shooting digital photography, I end up spending too much time on forums and marketplaces, getting a lot of gas instead, and buying and selling and trying to search for the perfect system or camera. I went through so many phases during these last couple of years shooting digital photography, and I didn't only shoot Nikon cameras, but I went through a few different Fujifilm cameras and a few Leica cameras as well, and sort of jumping between the systems, selling and upgrading, and jumping back into it again, and trying to decide what was the best system for me, basically. Going through all those phases, jumping into different systems, trying out different camera bodies and lenses and so on, was actually quite important to me, I decided in the end. Because the big lesson I learned there and realized was that the more features I had in a camera, the more time I was spending on trying to get better at the technical side of things instead of trying to get better at photography. Spending too much time fidgeting with settings and worrying about getting the best settings before taking a picture, instead of being in the moment and trying to get better pictures instead. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love photography gear. I love to talk about photography gear, and I'm as guilty as anyone browsing YouTube for reviews about different cameras and lenses and so on. But I'd rather spend my time looking for gear like cameras and lenses that inspire me in other ways than being technically superior to other cameras. That will inspire me to pick them up, go out to shoot instead, and have something different, like a different character or something else that inspires me. Then at one point, actually just before the pandemic started, I was kind of thinking about all those things and what had been missing from my photography and what I felt in my heart I needed to do to get inspired again. And I realized that I've been missing shooting film all along. So there, now it was decided I was gonna start shooting film again. And I was also gonna go out and search for all those dream cameras that I never got the chance to shoot back then when I shot film the last time. So just a few weeks later, after that decision, and after browsing the internet for a few good deals, I was back home in my apartment, holding a Nikon FE2 in my hands, one of those dream cameras that I never got to shoot back in the days. And I felt like coming home.